Chapter 1, Crash Landing. The shuttle's hull screamed against Earth's toxic atmosphere as I fought to maintain control. My 4 optical sensors tracked 17 different system failures while my translation matrix calibrated to local linguistic patterns. Dr. ZYX of the Galactic Scientific Council, 500 years of experience evaluating dying civilizations, and I was about to become another casualty statistic. The impact drove my elongated frame through the pilot's restraints. Blue ichor, what humans would call blood, seeped from multiple lacerations across my translucent skin. My portable analysis unit sparked and died, leaving me with only basic sensory equipment and 72 hours to complete my mission before the Council's extermination fleet arrived. Through the cracked viewport, I observed the reason for my assignment: another failed species consuming itself in its final throes. Smoke columns rose from burning cities, the acrid stench of warfare mixing with the chemical tang of environmental collapse. Projectile weapons discharged in staccato rhythms while primitive vehicles burned fossil fuels in desperate resource raids. Always the same patterns, I noted mentally. Tribalism, competition, violence when resources dwindle. They'll attack me for salvage within minutes. I activated my emergency beacon, not for rescue, but to document my observations for the Council. If this mission failed, at least my data would inform future evaluations of similarly doomed worlds. The shuttle door hissed open, releasing me into Earth's contaminated atmosphere. My respiratory filters engaged automatically as I stumbled through debris fields of twisted metal and organic matter. The gravity felt oppressive after months in ship-standard artificial fields. That's when I saw her. A small human female, perhaps 8 standard years old by their developmental markers, emerged from the rubble. Her dermal covering was torn and stained with various substances I couldn't immediately identify. Malnutrition had carved hollows beneath her optical organs, and her locomotive appendages, legs, according to my translation matrix, bore multiple abrasions. She should have fled. Every survival instinct in any species demanded flight when confronting an unknown alien entity. Or she should have signaled others to attack and salvage my equipment. These were the only logical responses I'd observed in 5 centuries of similar encounters. Instead, she approached. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her vocal cords producing sounds my translator converted to inquiry about my physical condition. She carried a small container. Analysis suggested purified water, extremely precious in this contaminated environment. I function adequately, I responded, testing my translation matrix's output capabilities. Without hesitation, she offered me the container. "You're bleeding that blue stuff. Mom says water helps everything heal better." I stared at the offering. My sensory apparatus detected approximately 200 milliliters of clean water, likely her entire daily ration in this resource-scarce environment. She was proposing to give her life-sustaining supply to an unknown alien entity that could easily overpower her. "This water, you require it for survival," I stated, confused by her behavior. "Yeah, but you need it more. You're hurt worse than me." My analytical processes faltered. In 500 years of studying dying civilizations, I had never encountered such behavior. Resource sharing without group members violated every principle of evolutionary biology. This was not merely illogical, it was unprecedented. I accepted the water container, drinking the liquid while my sensors analyzed its composition. Pure H2O with trace minerals, more precious than currency in this devastated environment. The child named Maya, according to her neural field patterns, had just committed an act that defied scientific explanation. Observation 1, I subvocalized into my recording device. Human female juvenile displays paradoxical altruistic behavior under extreme resource scarcity. Subject shares survival critical supplies with unknown alien entity. Behavior contradicts established evolutionary models. Maya settled beside me on a chunk of concrete, apparently unconcerned that I was documenting her every action. "What's your name? Are you from space?" "I am Dr. ZYX. And yes, I originated from space, as you term it. Cool. I'm Maya. Are you here to help us? Help them? I was here to determine if her species deserved salvation or extermination. But as I observed this small human sharing her water while her world died around her, I realized my mission had become far more complex than expected. I am here to understand your people, I replied carefully. Good, she said, leaning against my arm despite my alien physiology. We need understanding. Everything's been so scared and angry lately. Through my dermal sensors, I detected her elevated stress hormones, chronic malnutrition markers, and signs of prolonged sleep deprivation. Yet her neural patterns indicated genuine contentment in this moment of connection with a potentially dangerous unknown entity. First data point recorded, I thought. Perhaps this species will provide more interesting observations than expected. Chapter 2, The first test dawn brought screaming. Maya and I had sheltered in the ruins of what my translator identified as a school, an institution for juvenile education, now reduced to twisted metal and shattered polymer composites. I had spent the night analyzing her behavior patterns while she slept against my arm, her small frame radiating the warmth characteristic of mammalian metabolisms. The screaming grew closer. Through gaps in the debris, I observed 5 adult human males approaching, their locomotive patterns indicating hostile intent. They carried primitive projectile weapons and bladed implements, standard resource acquisition tools for dying civilizations. Maya, I whispered, gently disturbing her sleep cycle. Danger approaches. She woke instantly, a survival trait common to children in war zones. Her optical organs focused on the approaching threat, pupils dilating with fear response chemicals. Scavengers, she whispered. They take everything. We need to hide. But hiding was no longer possible. The lead male had spotted my shuttle's metallic components glinting through the rubble. His vocalizations reached us clearly through my translation matrix. Look at that tech. Alien shit's worth more than food. Grab everything. What about the kid and the freak? Another inquired. Kids slow us down. Freak might have weapons. Kill both, take the salvage. I had anticipated this scenario. Humans under resource pressure always chose violence over cooperation. It was the fundamental pattern that doomed species like theirs. Maya would become collateral damage, and I would either defend myself or become another data point about failed civilizations. But Maya surprised me again. Instead of fleeing or cowering, she stepped between me and the approaching scavengers. Her small frame trembled, but her vocal cords produced clear, strong sounds. This is Dr. ZYX. He's hurt and needs help. Please don't hurt him. The scavengers laughed, a harsh sound indicating derision rather than humor. Move aside, girl. We're taking the alien's gear. No, Maya replied simply. The lead scavenger raised his projectile weapon. My combat protocols activated automatically, calculating 17 different methods to neutralize the threats while protecting the human child. But before I could act, another voice echoed from the ruins above us. Hey! Assholes! Pick on someone your own size. A human male approximately 16 standard years old dropped from an elevated position, landing between Maya and the scavengers. His physiological markers indicated advanced malnutrition and chronic stress, but his grip on a makeshift blade remained steady. My sensors identified familial genetic markers. This was Maya's sibling. Jake! Maya called out. Don't fight them. 5 against 2, the lead scavenger observed. Bad odds, kid. 2 against 5, Jake corrected. My sister doesn't fight, but she makes me stronger than all of you combined. What followed violated every principle of human behavioral psychology I had studied. Jake, clearly outmatched, obviously malnourished, strategically disadvantaged, attacked the scavenger group with absolute determination. Not to acquire their resources, not to establish dominance, but to protect an injured alien and his younger sister. The combat was brief and brutal. Jake's blade found the lead scavenger's weapon arm while my defensive systems activated, generating enough electromagnetic interference to disable their energy weapons. The remaining scavengers fled, dragging their wounded leader. Jake collapsed, bleeding from multiple lacerations. Maya immediately began tending his wounds with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. Observation 2, I recorded. Human male juvenile engages in combat against superior numbers to protect family unit and unknown alien entity. Subject chooses probable death over abandoning others. Behavior pattern inconsistent with survival-based species model. Why did you do that? I asked Jake as Maya cleaned his wounds with precious clean water. Jake winced as his sister worked. Maya shared water with you. That makes you family. Family protects family. But I am not genetically related to your breeding group, I pointed out. Genetics don't make family, Maya said without looking up from her medical care. Kindness does. My analytical processes struggled with this concept. In 500 years of studying civilizations, I had never encountered a definition of family group membership based on behavioral patterns rather than genetic similarity. Yet these humans had just risked their lives to protect someone they had known for less than 24 hours. Perhaps this species requires more thorough testing, I decided. Their behavioral patterns are proving unexpected. Chapter 3, The Water Miracle. By the second day, my injury diagnostics reported significant improvement thanks to Maya's medical care and their family's sharing of scarce resources. Jake's wounds had also begun healing, though his protective instincts remained hyperactive whenever strangers approached our shelter. That morning brought news that would test every assumption I held about human nature. Water. The cry echoed through the ruins from multiple vocal sources. Clean water. Underground spring. Maya's mother, Dr. Sarah Chen, according to the identification documents she carried, appeared at our shelter entrance. 34 standard years old, showing advanced stress markers and chronic sleep deprivation, yet her neural patterns indicated sharp intelligence despite their desperate circumstances. Maya, Jake, gather the containers, she instructed. Someone found a spring 3 blocks east. We need to hurry before. She stopped when she noticed me, her optical organs widening in what my sensors classified as surprise rather than fear. Mom, this is Dr. ZYX, Maya explained casually. He's from space and he's nice. Sarah's behavioral patterns indicated rapid cognitive processing as she evaluated the situation. After approximately 4.7 seconds, she nodded once. Any friend of Maya's? She said, then focused on practical concerns. Can you walk, Dr. ZYX? This could get dangerous, and we'll need to move fast. I function adequately, I replied, testing my locomotive systems. The crowd around the discovered spring demonstrated every pattern I expected from a dying civilization: desperation, aggression, competition for limited resources. Approximately 200 humans had gathered, many carrying weapons, most showing signs of severe dehydration. The spring itself was small, perhaps 50 liters per hour output, according to my flow analysis. Insufficient to meet the hydration needs of even half the assembled crowd. Mathematical probability suggested violent conflict within minutes as the strongest claimed the resource while the weakest perished. I activated my recording systems to document the expected massacre. Observation 3 Preparation, I subvocalized. Large human group encounters insufficient water supply. Anticipating standard resource competition patterns, violence, dominance hierarchies, survival of physically superior specimens. But then Sarah Chen did something unprecedented. She climbed onto a debris pile where everyone could observe her and began speaking in clear, projected vocal tones. Listen. This spring gives us maybe 50 liters an hour. We're about 200 people. That's not enough if we fight over it, but it's enough if we organize. Shouts erupted from the crowd. Weapons were brandished. Several humans began pushing toward the spring, exactly as I had predicted. But other voices joined Sarah's. She's right. Fighting wastes water. My kids need to drink. But so do yours. How do we organize? What followed challenged every scientific principle I had established about resource scarcity and human behavior. Instead of descending into violence, the crowd began implementing Sarah's organizational system. Children drank first, regardless of family group membership. Adults shared containers to maximize efficiency. Those with medical training identified the most severely dehydrated for priority access. Groups organized guard rotations to protect the spring from external threats. Most remarkably, when several humans arrived hours later with superior firepower and demanded exclusive access to the water, the entire crowd, strangers who had never cooperated before, formed a unified defensive barrier. "You want the water," shouted an elderly male who appeared to be dying from dehydration. "You go through all of us first." The armed newcomers retreated rather than face unified resistance. Observation 3 revised, I recorded, my voice patterns indicating confusion even to my own auditory sensors. Human group encounters critical resource shortage. Instead of predicted violence, subjects implement cooperative distribution system. Strangers protect strangers. Priority given to most vulnerable group members rather than strongest. Behavior pattern, unprecedented in my experience. Maya tugged on my arm. "See. People are good when they remember how." "Remember how?" I asked. "To be human," she replied simply. I spent the remainder of that day observing as the water distribution continued without a single violent incident. Humans shared containers, took turns guarding the spring, and organized shifts so everyone could rest while maintaining group security. As the sun set, I realized my fundamental assumptions about this species required complete revision. These weren't the actions of a failed civilization. These were the behaviors of a species that somehow maintained cooperation even under extinction-level pressure. Fascinating, I thought. And completely illogical. Chapter 4, The Ultimate Sacrifice. On my final day, with less than 24 hours remaining before the Council's deadline, I faced the test that would determine humanity's fate. The military arrived at dawn. 3 armored vehicles surrounded our shelter, their occupants wearing the protective gear and carrying weapons consistent with Earth's various governmental fragments. Their leader, a female approximately 40 standard years old with command bearing, approached our position under a flag of truce. "We know about the alien," she announced through external speakers. "We also know about the water spring cooperation. We have a proposition." Sarah, Jake, Maya, and approximately 50 other humans had gathered to hear this announcement. I remained hidden but monitored through my sensor array. "The government fragments are mobilizing for one final resource push," the commander continued. "We need every available adult for a mission that, well, let's call it high risk. In exchange, we can offer guaranteed water rations, medical supplies, and protected shelter for all children in this district." "What kind of mission?" Sarah asked. "Nuclear facility recovery. The automated systems are failing, and if we don't manually shut down the reactors, the contamination will make this entire region uninhabitable within months." My analysis indicated this was accurate. Earth's remaining nuclear facilities were indeed approaching critical failure states. "How high risk?" Jake inquired. The commander's delay before responding told me everything. Survival probability for the mission team is approximately 15%. A suicide mission, essentially. The adults would die to prevent nuclear contamination that would kill the children later. "And if we refuse?" Sarah asked. "Then we conscript the strongest available candidates. Starting with him." The commander pointed directly at Jake. The logical choice was obvious. Send the physically capable teenager on the mission, maximize his survival odds through his youth and strength, preserve the adult population for continued breeding and resource management. But that's not what happened. "No," Sarah said simply. "Ma'am, this isn't a request," I said. "No." Sarah's voice carried absolute finality. "You're not taking our children. Then you'll volunteer adult replacements?" Sarah looked around at the gathered crowd. I observed rapid nonverbal communication patterns, subtle gestures, brief eye contact, minimal head movements. In less than 30 seconds, this diverse group of strangers reached consensus without a single vocalization. "We volunteer," said the elderly man who had helped organize the water sharing. "All of us," added a woman barely past breeding age. "Every adult," Sarah confirmed. "But the children stay here." "All of them. Even the ones who aren't ours." My analytical processes struggled with the mathematics of this decision. The adults were choosing certain death to protect not just their own offspring, but the offspring of strangers, including children from different tribal groups they had never encountered before. Why? I found myself asking, though I had not intended to speak aloud. Everyone turned toward my hiding position. There seemed little point in concealment now. Why sacrifice yourself for children who are not genetically related to you? I clarified as I emerged from the rubble. Maya ran to me immediately, taking my hand in her small fingers. Sarah approached more cautiously, but without fear. "Dr. ZYX, right?" she said. "Maya's told me about you. You're here to study us." "To evaluate your species for preservation," I admitted. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "And what have you concluded?" "Your behavior patterns are confusing. Illogical. You consistently choose actions that reduce your individual survival probability while providing no apparent benefit to your genetic lineage." "That's not how we see it," Sarah replied. "These children, all of them, they're the future. Not just our future, but the future of everything good about being human. If we let them die to save ourselves, then we've already lost everything worth preserving." The military commander interrupted, "Ma'am, we need an answer. Will you provide adult volunteers, or do we conscript the boy?" "You have your volunteers," Sarah said. "When do we leave?" "Transport arrives in 1 hour." As the military departed to prepare, I found myself alone with Maya's family. This was my final opportunity to complete the evaluation, to understand what made this species different from the hundreds of others I had condemned to extinction. "I must tell you something," I said to Sarah. "I am not merely studying your people. I am here to determine if humanity deserves salvation before your planet becomes uninhabitable." Sarah's expression remained calm. "And what have you decided?" "I remain uncertain. Your behavior defies scientific explanation." Maya squeezed my hand tighter. "That's okay. Mom says the best things don't need explanations." "There is more," I continued. "My people possess the technology to save a small population, approximately 1,000 individuals, before your planet dies. If I recommend salvation, we could preserve your species. But we cannot save everyone." The silence stretched for 12.7 seconds. "Could you save just our family?" Jake asked quietly. "Yes. That would be possible." Another pause. Then Sarah did something that shattered my final scientific certainty about this species. "No," she said. "Mom," Jake started. "No," Sarah repeated firmly. "If you can't save everyone, and you're offering to save just us, then the answer is no. We don't survive by letting others die. But your children will perish with the rest," I pointed out. "Better to die as humans than live as something else," Sarah replied. Maya looked up at me with those large optical organs. "Dr. ZYX, what do you think makes someone worth saving?" I had studied this question for 500 years. I had evaluated civilizations based on technological achievement, cultural complexity, genetic diversity, survival adaptability, resource management, and countless other metrics. But sitting in these ruins, holding the hand of a child who had shared her water with a stranger, listening to a mother choose death rather than abandon other people's children, I realized I had been measuring the wrong things entirely. "I am beginning to understand," I said softly. An hour later, as the adults prepared to leave on their suicide mission, Maya approached me one final time. In her hands, she carried her only remaining possession, a small stuffed animal, worn and patched, with one optical organ missing and synthetic fur matted from years of comfort giving. "This is Mr. Bear," she said, holding out the toy. "He's been with me since I was little. I want you to have him." "Maya, this is your only, so you don't forget us," she interrupted. "When you go back to space, and you think about people, I want you to remember that we can love strangers just as much as family. That's what makes us human." I accepted the small toy, my sensors analyzing its composition, synthetic materials, traces of tears, genetic markers from multiple human children who had found comfort in its presence. Worthless by any objective measure. Priceless by standards I was only beginning to comprehend. Observation final, I recorded as Maya's family prepared to leave. Human species demonstrates consistent pattern of sacrificial behavior for non-genetic group members. Subjects choose collective benefit over individual survival. Pattern persists even under extinction-level pressure. Behavior cannot be explained by evolutionary biology, resource optimization, or survival logic. Can only be explained by. I struggled to find the correct term in my translation matrix. "Love," Maya said simply, as if reading my thoughts. "It's called love, Dr. ZYX." As the transport vehicles departed, carrying the adults to their almost certain deaths, I sat in the ruins holding a stuffed bear and trying to understand how a dying species had taught me something my own immortal civilization had never learned. Chapter 5, The Answer. My shuttle's emergency beacon activated as scheduled, transmitting the quantum entanglement signal that would bring the Council's response within minutes. I had 47.3 minutes to compile my final evaluation before the extermination fleet received orders to proceed or withdraw. Maya and the other children had organized themselves with remarkable efficiency. Jake, now the oldest at 16, had assumed leadership responsibilities, but the decision-making process remained collaborative. They were rationing their remaining supplies, organizing shelter repairs, and maintaining the water distribution system their parents had established. None of them knew yet that their parents would likely never return. The Council's transmission arrived precisely on schedule, the familiar harmonic patterns of my superior's voice reaching me through quantum communication. Dr. ZYX, report. Status of species evaluation. I looked at the stuffed bear in my hands, then at the children working together to survive in the ruins of their dying world. Evaluation complete, Council Prime, I replied. Recommendation, Immediate Species Preservation Protocol. Silence for 3.2 seconds, unusual for Council Prime, whose responses typically arrived within nanoseconds of my transmissions. Clarify, Dr. ZYX. What criteria support preservation? I had prepared for this question. In 500 years of evaluations, I had never recommended preservation. The Council would require unprecedented justification. Species demonstrates advanced cooperative behaviors, resource sharing under scarcity conditions, and protective instincts extending beyond genetic lineage, I began. Standard altruistic behaviors observed in 23.7% of evaluated species, Council Prime responded. Insufficient for preservation recommendation. What makes this species unique? I watched Maya helping a younger child repair a water container, her movements patient and gentle despite her own desperate circumstances. They love strangers, I said. Clarify. This species demonstrates consistent affectionate behavior toward individuals with no genetic relationship, no resource exchange potential, and no strategic alliance value. They share survival-critical resources with unknown entities. They sacrifice their lives for the offspring of other breeding groups. They choose collective benefit over individual survival even when individual survival is possible. Dr. ZYX, these behaviors violate fundamental evolutionary principles. Are you suggesting this species has transcended biological programming? I thought about Maya giving me her water. About Jake fighting 5 scavengers to protect us. About Sarah choosing death rather than abandon other people's children. About Maya giving me her most precious possession simply so I wouldn't forget them. Yes, Council Prime. That is exactly what I am suggesting. Another pause, longer this time. Dr. ZYX, in your 500 years of evaluations, you have never recommended preservation. Your analytical processes are the most reliable in the Council's service. However, your current recommendation appears to be based on emotional responses rather than scientific criteria. Council Prime, I request permission to transmit sensory records for your direct analysis. Granted. I transmitted everything: Maya's first gift of water, Jake's protective combat, the water spring cooperation, Sarah's impossible choice, and finally, Maya's gift of the bear. The Council's quantum processing systems would analyze every detail within seconds. The response took 47.2 seconds, an eternity in Council terms. Dr. ZYX, these behaviors are indeed unprecedented in our evaluation history. However, the species' technological level remains primitive, their environmental management has failed catastrophically, and their population conflicts demonstrate continued tribal instincts. Standard preservation protocol requires either technological advancement or successful long-term civilization management. Council Prime, I submit that we have been measuring the wrong criteria. Explain. I stood up, still holding Maya's bear, and watched the children sharing their final food rations with perfect equality. In 500 years, we have evaluated species based on their ability to survive, advance, and avoid self-destruction. We have preserved civilizations based on their achievements, their potential, their utility to the galactic community. But we have never asked the most important question. Which is, what do they give to the universe that the universe cannot create for itself? I could feel Council Prime's confusion through the quantum link. Dr. ZYX, species value is determined by survival capability and contribution potential. No, Council Prime. This species contributes something that cannot be manufactured, programmed, or evolved through natural selection. They contribute love that serves no biological function. They create beauty that provides no survival advantage. They sacrifice themselves for others who cannot reciprocate. They give gifts to beings who are leaving forever. I held up the bear, its worn fabric and missing eye somehow more significant than any technological marvel I had encountered in my centuries of evaluation. This toy is worthless by any objective measure. But it represents something our immortal, logical, efficient civilization has never possessed: the capacity to love someone so much that you give them your most precious possession simply so they won't forget you exist. The quantum link remained silent for a full minute. Dr. ZYX, are you suggesting that emotional capacity justifies species preservation? I am suggesting that this species has achieved something we have not. They have transcended their programming not through logic or technology, but through love. They have created meaning where none existed. They have chosen to be more than their biology demanded. Another pause. And you believe this, love, is valuable enough to justify the resources required for species preservation? I thought about Maya's hand in mine, her trust in a strange alien who could have destroyed her world. I thought about Sarah choosing humanity over survival, about Jake fighting impossible odds to protect others, about an entire community sharing water when sharing meant some would die. Council Prime, in 500 years of studying civilizations, I have learned to predict behavior, to analyze systems, to calculate probabilities. But I have never learned to hope, to trust, to give something precious away simply because it will make someone else happy. This species taught me these things in 3 days. Dr. ZYX. Council Prime, we are immortal, logical, and efficient. We have conquered death, scarcity, and conflict. But we have never created a single thing that exists purely to make someone else happy. We have never shared something precious with a stranger. We have never chosen love over logic. I looked around at the children building a future from the ruins of their world, their behavior defying every principle of survival I had ever studied. This species is worth preserving not because of what they might achieve, but because of what they are right now, proof that consciousness can choose love over logic, hope over despair, others over self. They are living evidence that intelligence can transcend its programming through pure will to be better than biology demands. The longest pause yet, 2.3 minutes. Dr. ZYX, the Council accepts your evaluation. Species preservation approved. Evacuation fleet deploying immediately. Estimated arrival, 6 hours. The quantum link closed, leaving me alone with the most profound realization of my 5-century existence. I had just saved a species not because of their potential, but because they had already achieved something my own people never had. They had learned that the most logical thing in the universe is to be illogical when logic leads to cruelty. Epilogue: the gift remembered. The evacuation ships arrived as Earth's final ecological systems collapsed. Massive vessels descended through toxic clouds, their hulls gleaming with technologies beyond human comprehension. Maya and her people boarded these ships without understanding why they had been chosen, trusting in the same inexplicable fate that had led them to share water with strangers and protect children who weren't their own. Sarah and the other adults returned from their nuclear facility mission, 17 survivors out of 43 volunteers. Their success had bought Earth's children an additional 6 months of habitability, though the planet was beyond saving. When Sarah saw the evacuation ships, she didn't ask how or why. She simply gathered her children and prepared for whatever came next. Dr. ZYX. Maya called out as her family approached the boarding ramp. Are you coming with us? I stood at the intersection between two worlds, the sterile perfection of my council ship and the chaotic warmth of humanity's transport vessels. I have duties to fulfill, I replied. My people require detailed reports about your species. Maya hugged my leg, an action that would have seemed impossible just days ago. Will you tell them about Mr. Bear? I looked down at the worn toy still clutched in my upper appendages. During the past 6 hours, I had found myself unconsciously stroking its synthetic fur whenever I felt uncertain, a behavior that served no logical function but somehow provided emotional regulation. I will tell them about Mr. Bear, I promised. Good. And Dr. ZYX? Yes, Maya. When you go home to your people, remember that being smart isn't the same as being good. And being good isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing to care more about others than yourself. She released my leg and ran up the boarding ramp, turning once to wave before disappearing into humanity's new future among the stars. I returned to my council ship and began composing the most important report of my career. But first, I performed an action that would have been incomprehensible to me 72 hours earlier. I created a small shrine in my quarters where I placed Maya's bear, not because it served any function, but because it reminded me of the day I learned that the most logical species in the universe could still discover new forms of logic. The report I submitted to the council became the foundation for new evaluation criteria. Species would no longer be judged solely on survival capability or technological advancement, but on their capacity to create meaning, beauty, and love that transcended biological programming. Humanity thrived in their new worlds, maintaining the cooperative behaviors that had saved them while developing technologies that complemented rather than replaced their essential humanity. They became teachers to species who had forgotten how to hope, healers to civilizations wounded by pure logic, and guardians of the idea that consciousness exists not merely to survive, but to choose what survival is worth. And in my quarters, on a shelf beside instruments capable of analyzing entire star systems, sits a worn stuffed animal with one missing eye, proof that the most advanced civilization in the galaxy still had something to learn from a dying species who chose love over logic. Maya's gift taught me that intelligence without compassion is mere computation, that efficiency without empathy is just sophisticated emptiness, and that the most profound questions in the universe cannot be answered through analysis alone. Sometimes, late in my rest cycles, I hold the bear and wonder if Maya remembers the alien who learned what gifts mean from a child facing extinction. Then I realize, she gave me her most precious possession not so I would remember her, but so I would remember what I learned from her. The answer to what makes a species worth saving isn't found in their achievements or potential. It's found in their willingness to give strangers the last of their water, to fight impossible odds to protect others, to choose hope over despair even when despair makes more sense. It's found in their capacity to love someone so much that they give away their most precious possession to someone who's leaving forever, simply so that love will be remembered across the stars. Maya's bear sits in my quarters still, 5 years later, as humanity spreads across 17 worlds and continues to defy every logical prediction about their behavior. They remain illogical, inefficient, and beautifully, inexplicably human. And every time I touch that worn synthetic fur, I remember the most important lesson in the universe: the heart of intelligence isn't computation. It's compassion. End of story.